Welcome back to our mega series, taking a look at all 30 athletes competing at this year's World's Strongest Man. We're looking at their story so far, how we expect them to do in the events, and how we rate their overall chances. Today's athlete is the Canadian superstar, placed third at World's Strongest Man in 2021, the one and only Maxime Boudreault. Auntie Liz, Maxime bursting onto the World's Strongest Man scene last year, placing third, shocking a lot of people, beating his countryman JF Caron. But he's been around a lot longer than people think. Tell us what we need to know.
Maxime has actually been competing at a high national level since 2013, and his first international competition was the Giants Live Scandinavian Open in 2015. His first really standout result was in the 2019 Festival des Hommes Forts de Warwick. Why does that have to be so long?
You totally butchered that.
I know. Where he placed second behind JF Caron, but he beat some massive names in the sport: Evan Singleton, Ivor Schmuxless, Belsack, Trey Mitchell, Bobby Thompson, Kevin Ferris, etc. In 2020, he competed in the Arnold USA qualifier for the Arnold Strongman Classic, and there he placed third behind Martins and Brian Shaw, but again beating some really big names in the sport, such as JF Caron, Rauno, Rob Kearney and Jerry Pritchett. He competed in his first World's Strongest Man competition in 2020, and this was a crazy group. He was in a group with Alexei Novikov, Tom Stoltman and Trey Mitchell, and he ended up losing the stone off to Tom Stoltman. But what a crazy group of stone lifters.
That's a crazy group.
That was kind of ridiculous.
It was, and it's a good job Alexei won the group.
Yeah, oh wow. Can you imagine having to go up with any of those three in the stone off? Maxime returned to World's Strongest Man in 2021, and again he found himself in the stone off, but this time he won against Ivor Schmuxless. In the final, even though he had a couple of bad events, he still placed third overall, thanks to a couple of really standout performances.
He has weapons.
And since last year's competition, he went on to win the 2021 Magnus Ver Magnusson Classic, which is his first international win so far.
Maxime, been improving steadily over the years. A lot of people don't realise how long he's been doing this.
I didn't realise how long he's been doing this.
It's the same story with so many of the guys.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great athletes out there all over the world that are working their backsides off to be noticed.
Yeah.
And it's just getting that break. And then once they get that break, we see the development quickly. They get the experience internationally. But it takes a long time to get to this type of level. Maxime's been doing it a long time. And when you're in Canada competing, there's a lot of big shows and you're up against some stiff opposition. So you're really, when you do get to that international scene, you're ready.
Yeah. The first event is the loading medley.
And loading, straight off the bat, really good event for Maxime. He's done very well at World's Strongest Man on loading. I think the worst he's placed is second. He's done exceptionally well in many international shows at loading. He's fast and athletic, and he's going to start off with some big points.
And he'll want them too, because I know deadlift is not his favourite event, and obviously next up is the deadlift ladder.
Absolutely, but when he won the Magnus Ver Magnusson Classic at the end of last year, he actually won the deadlift in that competition, and he's been steadily improving. Now, has he improved enough to really score big points at Worlds? Time will tell, but I know he's working hard on his weaknesses, and if he does have a weakness, it's going to be this in the heats. I think it will be less of a weakness in the heats than it will be in the final.
Yeah, agree.
But I still think he can pick up some points on the deadlift.
Next, we have the car walk. Now, it wasn't exactly a car, but obviously we filmed with Maxime just a couple of weeks ago at Clash, and you were doing some, well, you weren't training, but him and Evan were training yoke, weren't they?
Yes, they were. We've got car walk history with Maxime, and it's not the best. When you look at his results on yokes, car walks, etc., he's not been that good at these type of events. He trained with Evan and myself, I was there helping, and he's actually looking a lot better. Now, he sent me a training video recently because I gave him a few tips. Now, I'm not saying this is the reason he's going to do well, and it might not make a difference. But he sent me a few training videos with some of the tips that I said would help him. He's looking a lot better, much quicker. He's still not going to beat an Evan or a Rob Kearney, but I'm hoping he can actually score a fair few more points, and even 1 or 2 more points makes a big difference. So he's looking more comfortable on yokes. Does that transition to the car? The car's a little bit different, but it's an event he's more than capable of being good at. He just, in my eyes, was kind of making a few mistakes in where he was putting hand positioning and how he was holding the yoke. He's got the leg power, he's got the core power, to
speed,
and he's got the speed. So I think he can turn this into a decent event. It's just one of those events I'm pretty good at noticing weaknesses that people have. And very quickly he started to look a lot better. So
it's just whether or not he's had enough time.
It's only been
practice.
A short period of time. Ideally, you'd want more work on lighter yokes to really master the movement first. But he says he's feeling good on it. And if that's the case, and he comes in with no real weaknesses in the heats, he's going to make himself very hard to beat.
I know he prefers this next event over the deadlift. Next is the log lift for reps.
Absolutely. We spoke about the deadlift, and he's making progress on that, but it is still a weakness for him. Log, however, is a good event, and I think he can score big points here. He's very solid for max, very good for reps. Always places high. If you look at the history, whether it's reps, whether it's max, he's top 3 athlete. We don't often talk about him because there's the likes of Luke Stoltman, Ian Bibby, Graham Hicks, but he scores big points in a log event.
We don't talk about him because he doesn't talk about log. He doesn't say, I'm going to lift the log, do the log lift world record. And
maybe. And I think what's great about him is he's not chasing world records. No. He's trying to be a really good all-round athlete, which he is. And I think if he wants to, we saw last year how good he is at certain events. We've seen it for a number of years now. He is a little bit of an up and down athlete because he does have a couple of weaknesses, but he also has events he's unbelievable at. So he'll go to one competition, place really high. The next competition he can be quite low if the events are completely different. Looking at these, I think this group is looking good for him.
Is Canadian grip strength an urban legend? Because next we have the wrecking ball hold.
Well, when you look at results, it's not. He's got a very solid grip. He won the frame at the Arnold's this year, which was without straps. One of only, I think, 2 athletes to finish the course. Done very well in grip type events before. The Canadians can hold on to objects.
What are they doing over there? Like, they fighting bears or something?
They could well be. We'll have to kind of find the secret, but they all seem to have very strong grip.
All that said, even with the slight weakness in the deadlift, I think there's a chance Maxime could win a group. But if he finds himself in the stone off, this is another really good event for him, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we mentioned earlier that he did get beat on a stone off, but he was beat by Tom Stoltman. Yeah. You really want to avoid a Tom Stoltman.
Yeah, but
let's look at he was second on the stones last year to Tom in the final. He beat Ivers on stones. Ivers is a great stone lifter. He's one of those people you really don't want to see at the opposite end on a stone off. No. He's got incredible history on Atlas stones. Guys like Lissis, guys like Brian Shaw, they often just win their groups.
Yeah.
So even if you're in a group with them, you're probably not going to go up against them on the stone off. I really can't see many people challenging Maxime when it comes to stones.
So he was 3rd place last year. This year, we think he's got a good chance of possibly winning his group. But if he ends up in the stone off, he's got an extremely good chance of winning that. So shall we take a little look at the events in the final?
Absolutely.
So it starts with the Kanak Medley, which is the box carry into the yoke.
Yeah, and I think realistically, if we're looking at the final, it might be a weaker event. The yoke is making progress, but we don't know how much. We haven't seen it backed up in competition. Yeah. I'm sure he can score a few more points in the heats, but when you get into that final, you are against the best of the best.
And you're not starting on the implement. You have to transition to it, and it's getting everything right, remembering it all.
Yeah, that can
under
be
pressure.
That can be an issue, and we have a couple of guys there that are exceptional on moving type events.
Another event I know he won't love. He actually only scored 1 point in the deadlift in last year's competition and still placed 3rd. But it's the deadlift for reps next.
Yes, it shows how exceptionally good he is at certain events. And we mentioned that he won the deadlift at the Magnus Ver Classic. However, None of last year's World's Strongest Man finalists were in that competition. And it was an axle deadlift. There was, it was outdoors in very, very cold environment. Maxime's used to the cold. A little bit different when it's going to be blisteringly hot. At World's Strongest Man level, he still needs to improve the deadlift. We've seen the improvements. I've mentioned we think he can do better than he did last year, but there's still some monster deadlifters that he's going to be up against. So I don't expect big points for this event.
Next, the Flintstone lift. Behind the neck jerk, front of the neck, their choice.
Yeah, I'd expect all the athletes to go behind the neck if they're capable. It's just a more efficient way to get maximum power into the movement. And I've seen a lot of people kind of criticising online, saying they haven't got time to learn Olympic movements. I think these people are forgetting how powerful these men are.
Yeah. And then they are athletes as well.
We're not, if Tallahassee came in, yeah, he's going to kick all their asses. But these are big, strong men with powerful legs. I think we're going to see some big numbers on this event, and I'm really excited to see it. Maxime has not posted anything in terms of training for this event. We know he's decent at log lift, so that will transition a little bit. Like I've said, with other athletes, it doesn't mean much, to be honest. But I really have nothing to go off. So it's hard to say. It's going to be one of those events that's going to come down to we've got to wait and see. In terms of personal gut feeling, I don't see him winning this event, but I certainly don't see him coming last either. I think somewhere sort of mid to higher end of the table.
I was going to say the top half, I think he'll be.
Yeah, it depends who makes the final as well. We've seen some really good behind the neck jerkers posting videos. People like Pavlo Cordiaca, people like Paro Dwyer, even Adam Bishop, who's not renowned as a great overhead lifter, has been putting big numbers up on this movement. But it's a big question whether those athletes make the final. So we know he's good overhead. I'm sure he's capable of picking up some points. I don't expect a win, but he's an unknown, so we wait and see.
Next, another personal favourite of mine, the bus pull.
Bus pull, vehicle pull, whatever different vehicle it is, obviously it's different all the time, but it's a vehicle pull. And the history shows that Maxime is very, very good. Very rarely out of a top 3 when it comes to some kind of truck pull, vehicle pull type event. So this is somewhere he can really pick up some big points.
Then we have the power stairs. Do we have much of a track record there?
Yeah, it's an event he's done a fair few times and got decent performances on. It's not an event he's winning, but solid performer, and definitely this second half of this final much better for him. He can really get himself back into contention and potentially pull himself up the leaderboard.
Now, we know how good Maxime is at Atlas Stones. This year they're doing it with a bit of a run-in. Do you think that's going to affect someone like Maxime?
No, I think it's probably good for him. He's a well-conditioned athlete. I don't think it's going to affect him in the slightest. He was second on the Atlas Stones in the final last year. We know how great he is at Stones, and I think he can put in a huge performance here and get big points.
So we definitely expect to see him in the final. How do we think he'll do overall in the final with all that said?
I think the events for the groups are unbelievable for Maxime. I really cannot see him not making the final, barring a disaster with some kind of injury or something like that. So I do expect to see him in the final, all being well. I don't believe these events are as good as last year's events for him in the final of Worlds. In 2021, he obviously placed third. I don't think he will be top 3. I think maybe top 6. There's a couple of events, particularly those earlier events. There's the deadlift, the neck medley. He could potentially drop big points there. So I think he's got to make sure he gets as many as he can on those first few events and then really climb back up the leaderboard as the competition goes on. But Maxime is a solid performer. Looking forward to seeing how he does. The behind the neck jerk, the Flintstone lift, that's an unknown.
Yeah.
So maybe he can perform really well on that. That might push him up a bit. But for me, I think
5th?
6th to 5th place is kind of where I'm going to go. I don't think we see him top 4, top 3 this year. So Lizzie, Maxime Boudreault, unbelievable competitor. Like I said, I don't feel these are the absolute best events for him, but he's making solid progress and he's going to be a contender.
There we go then, another one ticked off the list, and we still have some really big names to come. If you're enjoying this series, please don't forget to comment to let us know, like the video, make sure you are subscribed, and we will see you again same time tomorrow.